We'll take a look at today's papers, and we're joined now by foreign policy writer Thom Woodroofe. Thom, good morning, good to see you.
Morning, how are you?
What's top of your list today?
The G20. So perhaps the best thing that came out of the G20 for Australia at least is that we will host the 2014 gathering. So it was actually a behind-the-scenes campaign. This didn't come out of nowhere. It's been on the cards for at least probably a year, and in fact Gillard at one point summoned all the G20 ambassadors all of our ambassadors to G20 countries back to Canberra a few months ago to really kick this campaign into gear. And we fought against Turkey and Russia, who are within our sort of select group, and 2014 it is. But now all the states are coming out trying to position themselves to host it, which puts a substantial amount on their bottom line, but also generates quite a lot of money just peripherally.
It does. It's quite an intense bidding war. It's early days, but it's really happening.
Pretty much every state premier and chief minister came out across the weekend, but if you actually do the rounds of each capital city and look at how viable they are, it's interesting. So Perth won't get it because of CHOGM, basically. That it's too recent.
Really? Even though their argument is that they were so successful in staging CHOGM,
it just won't get it. There was an angle for CHOGM, which was largely Stephen Smith emanated from there as foreign minister at the time, and the Africans had less distance to travel, but it won't be the same. Adelaide is probably an outside chance, I think. Melbourne hosted the last G20 Summit in 2006 when it was just finance ministers, and it would certainly give the Occupy movement something to hang around for.
Tom, am I missing something? What do I care whether we host G20 or not? What does this really matter?
Well,
you serious?
It's a boon for our international standing and credibility.
Stop it, Michael.
It is.
I know you're joking. Tom, you're serious. What's your problem?
Well, as I said, I mean, it costs a lot of money, but actually generates quite a lot of money for these states as well once you look at the federal support.
Absolutely.
That was the argument. That was the argument behind the Grand Prix. And look,
once you've expended money for security, for the heads of state, for security, for buildings, for everything else, for the lockdown of the city...
It's the Grand Prix for people like me. Absolutely.
You have
it's
to
the
get
20 most powerful people.
See, the Grand Prix loses money. It's been a disaster for
Send
Melbourne.
him to the Grand Prix. He needs some fun.
Anyway, Melbourne, I think, is a good chance. Yeah. Sydney won't get it probably because of APEC.
Why won't Sydney get it?
Because of APEC in 2007.
We're still talking about this.
Canberra's too small.
I was ready to move on several minutes ago.
Brisbane won't get it because they're hosting.
Tell me you're done.
Aiming for the 28 Commonwealth Games.
That's Darwin.
Darwin's too small, I think, but also Obama's putting them on the map.
Look, call me when you're finished with this one. I'll join you.
Wagga Wagga.
I'll do something down here. Okay, moving on. Honestly, this is an interesting story. Now, this one I think is a little more fascinating. Well, he's known by the moniker, you know, the Bali Boy, the Bali drugs boy, can't be identified by name. But it would seem that the family's been trying to, well, shop him out. Is that the correct way of putting it?
Yeah, but this story is very interesting. So this is just a small column in the Oz. But if you look at the weekend coverage on this, it was very, very different. So
just update the basics of the story.
Sure. So the weekend coverage of the story across the media pretty much was he sold his story $300,000 to $400,000 to Channel 9, and it will be basically syndicated through their stuff. So it'll go on A Current Affair, it'll go on 60 Minutes, and it'll go in their magazines like I don't know, Women's Weekly or whatever it is, I suppose. But then the story today is that no, the family's made this contingent on once he's actually been prosecuted or once his trial has been held, which was not what the original story was, and also that the story will be done when he's back in Australia, whenever that may be, which is not what the coverage was at all over the weekend. And I thought, my first reading of that was, this is strange that they're going to sell the story before his trial.
How risky is that?
Exactly. Secondly, which wouldn't be allowed here, I think, from my understanding. And secondly, that they would do it in Indonesia rather than indeed wait for them to come back here. So I don't know whether this is necessarily a change of tune before the contract was signed, because there were reports that the filming crew were flying out on Wednesday to Bali, or whether this is quite simply just misreporting. But either way, it's an interesting change.
Channel 9 has quite firmly reported as saying this morning there was no deal ever struck.
Never.
But whether that was sort of the intention to then sign that deal, and then there was we've looked at the coverage and we think that the best way to put this in the right light is to do it this way or not, I'm not sure.
Well, one of the quotes is interesting, though, from Channel 9, which is, if the family thought they were engaged in a bidding war with Channel 7, they were bidding all on their own. Basically, we were never in there, which is a pretty strong assertion. And, as you say, would seem to utterly contradict the original coverage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hard to think that everyone was so off the mark over the weekend. Maybe it happened at a junior level.
Maybe it did, but it's certainly...
There's sort of plausible deniability at the top, if you know
up
what
the
I mean.
food chain.
The weekend story said this was being signed off by the CEO at 9.
Oh, this is very interesting. Can I just, before we move, just very quickly, you mentioned in passing that you thought it actually was not possible or legal for that to be broadcast here while it was continuing. On what basis?
No, if it was a similar story here.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sorry, I thought you meant
so profiteering basically from the Crimes Act, I think.
Absolutely.
Is
the state would come along and say, thanks, that's mine.
Exactly.
It is fair to say, though, that if the boy does get off on Friday and gets sent home, it will be open slather then for
it will, but I think
commercial
that
stations.
the angle from my perspective is, I think Australians in large part probably find this kind of checkbook journalism a bit off-putting sometimes, and it can actually really misfire for that boy's case in generating sympathy.
Oh yeah.
So I think the way that the media and indeed his family through their agent presumably handles this is critical, and I think that change of tune may have been a part of that.
When you compare that to, say, the case of the Australian model Michelle Leslie, I think it was, and the way that family decided to play it, which was low-key, pious, quiet, apologetic, doing everything they could, and it just went away.
Well, I saw another example over the weekend was the girl who had the bomb put around her neck in Sydney. Now, she was obviously a victim of something, but the way that family played that was very under the radar, small amounts of public comments, said to the media, OK, that's enough, we'll give you a little bit, but that's it.
She hasn't popped up in any women's magazine or commercial TV current affairs program.
And if they're wise, it'll stay that way. We stay with the Australian newspaper now. What's the yarn that you're looking at here? Yeah,
so the A+, it was one of those moments where you kind of think, is this an old edition of the newspaper? But they've got a big spread on what really happened with the Osama Bin Laden raid in Pakistan. And it's actually taken from the Sunday Times, but it's a really interesting read. And they've got this box on the side of the page there, which you can see, which effectively says, look, what was reported at the time. It's similar to last year in terms of looking at what was reported and then what actually happened. And then basically via interviews with a whole range of people, including some of the SEALs, they've then been able to work out, well, what did actually happen. So, for example, it was reported that it took 90 minutes for them to actually find Osama after a protracted firefight. It took them 90 seconds to get to him, which is, as you would probably imagine. There was reports that President Obama was watching it via helmet cams with the SEALs. Again, that wasn't true. He was in fact watching it from a drone that was 6,000 feet in the air, so his view would have been completely different. It would have been an aerial shot rather than a facial shot, effectively. So
that famous Situation Room photograph then of them all sitting around and Hillary Clinton with her hand over her face like that, would that have been the aerial drone footage?
Sure, but I think
or perhaps a replay.
But I think audio as well they would have had, so that's probably important, and that's probably, I think, would have caused the emotions more than necessarily seeing an aerial shot.
An aerial shot's not going to be sitting there going, can you get a better picture on this?
Exactly. But wasn't that a powerful photo for his presidency?
Yep. And speaking of the Clintons, the final item this morning is a book by, I think it's Bill Clinton.
It is, yeah. So I think it's either about to come out or it has come out, but the New York Times over the weekend had snippets of it. It's called Back to Work. I don't know how people sell these kind of books outside of memoirs, but apparently there's all these snippets in there that apparently he spends hours each day at his home studying the economy and weird government reports and basically thinking, look, if I was president, how would I deal with this? And then the book is basically that. So
this is a memoir, or
no, it's basically, well, look, if I was president, how would I deal with the economy right now? Which is really going to piss off Obama.
Otherwise known as Hillary's cheat sheet.
Well, arguably, but the two have never really got on, and the Obamas have never had the Clintons over for dinner, which I think's
she campaigned truly hard against him, and some of the stuff that came out of Bill's mouth, during the lead up, during the nomination process, it was really rough on Obama.
Obama's rise being a fairy tale and this and that. Yeah, there was no love lost during the campaign.
It goes back even before that. I mean, Bill Clinton endorsed Obama's opposition candidate when he ran for the Senate
in Chicago. Yep.
Dates back a long way.
I don't care, I'll read it. The man is fascinating. Always good to see you, Tom. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.